Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Zebra Report. And this week, I get to complain and explain what's going on with tariffs. So, I first want to explain why we should be concerned about tariffs in the housing industry. And that is because the reality is that the four big L's that affect everything to do with housing are lumber, labor, lending, and land. And anytime any one of those is affected or impacted in any way, we have to pay attention. So, as we know, there was a recent tariff put on lumber with Canada and Mexico. Now, that tariff has now been postponed for a month, and that was a proposed tariff of 25% lumber. Now, the reason why that's so problematic in certain states is because we rely, so for example, Washington, Oregon, we really rely on lumber that we get from Canada. So we don't want a 25% tariff on lumber. So for the moment, we can, breathe a sign of relief and say, okay, no tariff on lumber. The minute that one of four, that lumber category is affected, it's a big, big issue. Now, there was just as of February the 10th, a tariff put on steel and aluminum. Now, steel and aluminum, yes, it absolutely affects construction, but it doesn't affect residential construction like it does lumber. So I'm sitting back, breathing a sign of relief over the lumber tariff that has now been postponed. But I just want to explain how tariffs work and what you also need to understand in terms of timing. Just because we get a tariff on lumber that comes in, let's say it comes in 30 days, it takes time for that to trickle down to the end product, the end consumer, because the reality is that it's going to take a year for that to hit the market because it's going to take a minimum of, depending on where you're at, 7 to 12 months to get a home built. And that then there's the months it takes to develop the land and to do the infrastructure and et cetera, et cetera. Now, for those builds that are, let's say, they've gone through the development process, then it's going to be a shorter time, shorter impact time before it hits the consumer. But the reality is that we don't want tariffs on lumber. We don't want tariffs on steel. We do not want tariffs on construction products because we already have a pricing crisis, and that is that we can't afford the homes that we have right now. And the cost to build has gone up as the cost of that lending has gone up, and land has gone up, and labor has gone up. We have three things going on in our housing industry right now, and that is we have a labor crisis shortage. We absolutely have a land crisis shortage, and we have a lending, a really, for most builders and developers, a lending challenge because the cost of money today is double what it was a few years ago. So all of those things are pushing our prices up. So when you see talk of tariffs, just understand that they ultimately will end up on the final price tag on any house that's built using the product that now has that increased price tag on it. So for now, yes, I'm concerned about steel and aluminum, but not nearly as worried as when I hear anything to do with lumber. So for now, we can all take a breather, but I will be watching this issue very carefully because it's a big deal, especially in areas like Washington State, because there are other states that get their lumber from within the United States. But when you're so far north, like we are up in Washington State, then we have the cost of trucking. And that's why we rely, and the northern states rely so heavily on the Canadian market for getting our lumber. By the way, I am a dual citizen. I come from Canada. So the Canadians and the Americans need to keep those tariff wars at bay. We don't need any tariff wars with our good neighbors on the north, our Canadians. So, okay, guys, until next time, just keep an eye on those tariffs.